So in this demo, I'm going to show you a mass production technique. We're gonna throw off the hump, okay? So when potters do 100 cups a day, 100 bowls a day, most of them don't, or some, I should say, don't center each little ball separately. What they do is that they get a hump, they somewhat center that hump, okay? And they only center the part that they are going to work with, okay? So I'll show you what I mean. So you can see that the bottom, it's definitely not centered. The top is, at this point, it's definitely not centered, okay? And this is some recycled clay. So throwing off the hump also allows you to definitely get rid of things that might have air pockets, as you can see. Didn't wedge this well, okay? This is off center. You see that? Boom, 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 it hits my finger. But I'm not going to worry so much about that. I'm gonna worry about the part that I'm gonna use. So for a bowl that I'm gonna throw off the hump, because it's intuitive, because it's mass production, I don't wanna weigh every little piece of clay. What I'm gonna do instead is focus on how I'm going to hold my hands. And that is going to be my measuring device. And with practice, all my bowls are going to be identical. And I'm also going to use a tool because I'm going to shape my bowl in a similar fashion to this tool. So this is going to be the way that I'm going to gauge the height of the bowl, but also the shape of the bowl. Okay. And so I'm going to use a bit of water here at the tip of the hump. Okay. And bring some of the clay that I'm going to use to the top. As you can see, this is very off center, okay? And that's okay because I'm only going to use the top, okay? If it's too off center from the bottom, it's definitely going to throw you off visually because you have this thing that's spinning. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to somewhat center the whole thing, not completely center, but I'm going to make it so that it's not so disturbing, okay? So it's a little bit more a bit more behaved. Okay, so that's not that bad. That's better. It's not so distracting anymore. Okay, I'm gonna cone this down, and just like any other form, I'm going to be coning the amount of clay that I'm going to use a few times so that I can make sure that that whole clay it's nice and cohesive, nice and fluid. And see, it's I'm not finding any resistance on the heap on the top, so I'm ready to open this bowl quite soon. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is gauge the amount of clay that I'm going to need for this bowl. Okay, and that might be too big, so I'm gonna back up. And this is all intuitive based on experience. Okay, and I'm gonna make this a little bit thinner and try it again. That feels better. And the way that I'm gauging is that my tips here are joining, my thumbs are feeling nice, and they're not necessarily touching here. They're somewhat in the verge of touching, and that feels good. That's about a nice big bowl. Okay, so I'm gonna choke it, and now that's going to be okay. I think I have enough clay. And what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna go ahead and open. And again, you can see that the top is nice and centered, but the bottom it's spinning out of control, and it's completely fine. Okay. So as I open this is also a way to gauge the depth of your bowl and the shape of your bowl. So it's a pointy bowl. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna open it. I'm gonna open it so there's a nice white bowl at the bottom. Okay. I'm gonna dry the inside and take a look at what I got. And as I dry it, I'm also compressing. That's very important when you're throwing off the hump. You definitely want to compress, use a lot of force. I'm going back and forth and compressing the bottom. in drawing the bottom so that I don't have an S crack. I also don't want to have a little belly button at the center of this. I want it to be nice and smooth. I could get rid of that later with the tool, but if I could do that now, that would save me time and effort. Okay, so now I have this much clay on the side. Now I could focus on pulling the clay and shaping it like a bowl. So see, it's becoming a bowl already. Okay. Now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna continue to shape it with my fingers and expand it because when you shape a clay delicate as porcelain, you want those particles to align with through compression in the shape that you want it to be. If you use a tool, what happens if it's a very delicate clay, if you use a tool to stretch it and you let it go, guess what? That form is going to turn into an oval form. Okay. So this is a nice cereal bowl. I'm going to do my last pull. This is my third pull. Okay. So in shaping, I'm using the pressure between my fingers rather than a tool. Okay. I could also use a tool to stretch it, but the idea is to shape the particles of clay, to compress the particles of clay in the shape that you want them to exist. Okay. Notice that I'm addressing the rim. In the final stages, I'm going to use the chamois. I'm going to dry this and look at it, make sure that there's no bumps on the inside. So if I had a little person skating here, that little person wouldn't bump into a bump. So what I'm going to do, this is where this tool comes in. I'm just going to use the tool on one side of the bowl. In this case, is my right side, just to remove any unevenness. Okay. And to gauge the height of this bowl by looking at the relationship to the tool. So visually, I have a clue of how this bowl is in relationship to the one that I'm going to make next. Okay. And so I like to clean up the inside of my bowl with this tool, even though it's scary because it's sharp. And because it's sharp, I'm able to definitely clean that bottom of the bowl with this tool. Okay. So there's a little bump here that I don't like. So I'm going to go ahead and do this a couple of times. There you go. Got rid of the little bump there. And now there's a seamless transition in the bowl. You don't want any bumps. Okay. You will be able to see that when it comes to glazing. Okay. Makeup sponge here just to make everything smooth. Okay. If you're going to use some nice glazes that like celadons or temacus that react really nice with texture, you might leave some throwing marks, not very subtle throwing marks, so it could show that this was done on the wheel. Okay. And then last but not least, I'm going to use my chamois here. Okay. On the side, I'm gonna wet it because it's getting hard. Wet the chamois to smooth out that rim so that it's nice and functional. You don't want sharp rims; they could chip when you wet them. And so that if I use this for cereal and I flip it just a bit, that would give me a little place for the lip to drink the end of the milk. And now I'm going to cut this off um, so that it's nice and thick at the bottom so that I could trim a really nice foot. Okay. So that gives me enough clay to trim a really nice foot. I'm going to clean that up. Ouch. Okay. Clay's misbehaving here at the bottom. I'm not going to mess with that right now. It's going to throw off my form if I, well, never listen to my own advice. Okay, there you go. I should have left it alone and I could have trimmed it off when it dried. But now that I have the form of the bowl, I could do a little hole here and run the wire underneath if I find the wire. There's the wire. Okay. And what I'm going to do run the wire underneath. Okay. And now, because this is, I have a lot of thickness here, I could remove the bowl and then allow it to dry elsewhere. Okay. So that's making a bowl. Now, what the other thing, or the other way to do a bowl, okay, is using a tool, as I mentioned. Okay. Using it to shape it. Okay. And so I'm preparing this clay heap. Again, I'm measuring the amount of clay. I think I'm gonna need a little bit more from up down here. Okay. It got skinnier, so I have to pay attention to how my fingers align with this clay. Okay, so it wasn't as thick, it was a little bit thinner. So let's say, what was it, that thin? About that thin. Yeah, but this was a little bit flatter from my memory. Okay, it was fingers were touching, something like that. That feels intuitively fine. Okay, now I'm gonna open the form. Again, my hands are working together. They're not working separate like this. Okay, they're working together. Intuitively, I'm digging to the depth that I dug with the other one. Okay, pretty soon I'm gonna use this sponge, but basically, I'm gonna go ahead and open more. There you go. And then I'm going to pull my walls. So when I pull, my dominant hand goes on the outside. In this case, it's my right hand. It's going to go on the outside. I'm definitely removing and compressing. Almost forgot to do that. And compressing, really, really important. Okay. And then I'm going to pull, but this time I'm only going to pull upwards, not in the shape of a bowl, slightly. Okay. I'm going to leave some thickness at the end here because I'm going to stretch the end. So I need to not follow my intuition of pulling the clay all the way up, leaving some thickness at the end. And now I'm going to use a tool. I could use a rubber tool, okay, or the metal tool, the wooden tool. I'm going to use this little rubber tool to press against the clay here and bring it downwards. So if you look at it from the top, it's becoming an oval. Now you could do this for clays with grog, but with porcelain, you have to do this slowly if you are going to use a tool, because in the firing, the clay will, because the particles were not aligned as you threw them, they could, with the heat and all that, they could turn into an oval form. Okay, so I'm gonna use this tool instead, but for now I'm gonna compress the rim because I'm stretching it. It's becoming delicate. Okay, and then I'm gonna use this tool here to really compress the clay and shape it by moving the tool up and down gradually so that I don't lose the form and so that I could avoid um, that oval shape that happens in the firing process. If you notice, I have to keep going back to the rim so that I could make that rim smooth and to dry the inside. Okay. And then I'm gonna wet it just so that the tool has a little bit less friction. And then I'm gonna shape it with the tool. Remove it slowly. So it's all about your personal preference. It doesn't even have to be the tool. It could also be your finger. Okay. And there's my bowl. There is enough space for me to dig out a foot. I'm gonna trim the foot of this bowl. Okay. Could hold it up and spin the wheel. And I could remove the bowl. Okay. And in a similar fashion, I could throw a bowl that I will open with my hands and not by pulling it, but rather open it with my hands. Okay. And of course, you have to try whatever works for you. It could be a combination of different things. So I'm gonna go ahead and create my little heap of clay, get it ready for that bowl. The unevenness from cutting the other bowl showing up here, so I'm gonna remove that. It's a little lumpy area there, and I'm going to get it ready to open. So there's my bowl. Open it up, dry the inside and compress it. Pull the wall, dominant hand on the outside. Notice that my hands are working together. I'm allowing the centrifugal form to shape that bowl. And then I'm going to use my hands together because I could gauge the thickness of, of the clay. And now I could, there you go. That feels a lot better than using the tool. Okay. I could definitely use my fingers to glide up and down this form. Okay. Nice. Nice transition. Feels beautiful. Ooh, that's nice. Dress the rim. I'm gonna dry this because it's a lot of water. Okay. That's a nice bowl. Okay. So this shape is more of a bowl that is inwards. Okay. You would definitely stretch it or form it differently. You would start with a wider, if it was a bowl that is going to hold uh, say soup for a baby that needs to get cold after you serve it, then it would be a wider bowl. I don't know that I could turn this into a wider bowl because it's already shaped as a ice cream bowl or for a cereal bowl. I could just go ahead and stretch it from the bottom with my hand. So what I did, I flatten it, and then I'm going to now use a little tool here to make that a little bit flatter. Now I have a different shape of bowl, but I should have done this from the beginning. That way the transition from the center to the out was a bit more um the shape would, the way that I opened it and all that. But see, there you go. There's a bowl with a little bit of a wider base, and of course that changed my whole beautiful line that I had. Okay, there you go. Remove some of that extra excess, and now it changed. The shape of the bowl changed. And when I trim it, I have to take that into consideration because now here's the foot. Okay, you don't want to have a narrow foot with this shape because it could easily tip over. So you want to have a foot out here where the bottom ends and the side begins. It looks like the foot is at the right place. The inside is nice and smooth. Okay, I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit. Be a perfectionist with this bowl. Leave some finger marks for the glaze. Very subtle, nothing too deep, so that there's no bacteria that is collecting. And now, and of course, address the rim at the end. Okay, with my chamois. Nice rim here. Okay, and now I could go ahead and dig my foot, run the wire underneath, lift it up very carefully, transport it so that it dries, but you can have a view of a wider bowl in comparison to the other one. This bowl is definitely more, it holds about the same amount of liquid, but that liquid is exposed to the air, so the content gets colder faster because it's flattened. Okay, and that is the end of this demonstration.